When the surgeon said, "We're ready to begin," I felt my heart hammer like a drum in my chest. My son, lying pale and hooked to monitors, smiled weakly at me. His hand trembled in mine. I had spent months preparing for this moment. My kidneys had been tested, retested, every value painstakingly calculated, all for him. All for his survival. I had told myself this was the most important thing I could ever do. And yet, in that sterile hospital room, under the bright surgical lights, my grandson, little Mikey, tugged at my sleeve. "Grandma," his voice was tiny, barely a whisper. But the sound of it sliced through the fog of anesthesia and surgical prep like a knife. "What is it, sweetheart?" I tried to keep my voice steady. My pulse was already frantic. He hesitated. His eyes were wide, shimmering with some truth I hadn't expected. "Mom, she's not your son's wife." I froze mid-breath, the words catching somewhere in my chest. Not my son's wife? What was he saying? My mind raced, and for a moment the room seemed to tilt. The surgeon's mask, the foredrip, the beeping monitors, all faded to gray. Seconds away from surgery, and I was staring at my grandson, trying to understand what he had just revealed. My heart skipped. My hand shook violently, and for a heartbeat, I wondered if the entire operation, and my carefully constructed plan to save my son, was about to be derailed. I blinked at Mikey, gripping his small shoulders. "Tell me, now. Tell me everything." And in that moment, I realized that the secret my grandson carried wasn't just a surprise, it was something that could change everything about my family, my son's marriage, and the very reason I was about to risk my own life. Before this hospital room became my world, life had a rhythm. My son, David, was a man who laughed loudly and loved fiercely, though recently that laughter had been replaced by a quiet I didn't recognize. He had been sick for months, his kidneys failing one by one, and the worry etched deep lines into his face that weren't there before. I lived just a few blocks away, in the house David grew up in, filled with the faint smell of old wood, my husband's cologne lingering in a forgotten drawer, and the morning aroma of coffee brewing in my little kitchen. I had spent decades watching my children grow, teaching, correcting, loving, always ready to step in when life demanded it. Mikey, my 7-year-old grandson, was the light of our family. He had his father's dark hair and his mother's mischievous grin. He could make me laugh even on days when my bones ached with worry. He was the first to notice changes in moods, to ask questions no adult dared. David's wife, Laura, was complicated. Polite, attentive, yes, but there had always been a distance I couldn't place. She smiled, made the perfect casseroles, and kept the house tidy. Yet, she never laughed like she belonged. She never looked at my son with that raw, unfiltered love I remembered seeing in his college girlfriend, in his first crush, in the woman I thought he would marry with his whole heart. For months, I had been preparing. Kidney donation is not simple. My body had been tested, weighed, evaluated. I had balanced my life around this one act of love, this one final gift to my son, who had given me joy beyond measure. We spent the evenings quietly together, watching old comedies on television, David joking about being a senior patient even though he wasn't that old. I would rub his hand, feeling the thin skin, the faint tremor of fatigue. And Mikey would curl up at my feet, asking endless questions, telling me about school, about friends, about life as if we were untouchable by tragedy. Laura, meanwhile, was always just behind the scenes, making sure the schedules were coordinated, appointments made, medications ready. I thought nothing of it. I assumed, as mothers often do, that she had the family's best interest at heart. Life felt fragile but steady, like glass teetering on a shelf. And then, one ordinary morning, everything tilted. It was the little things at first. A missed call on Laura's phone. A hurried text she hid from me when she thought I wasn't looking. Her eyes, sometimes avoiding mine in ways that seemed strange. And Mikey, he began whispering odd things. "Grandma. Mommy says I can't tell you," he would murmur, glancing nervously at his mother. I didn't want to believe it. My son was sick, my mind couldn't afford another heartbreak. But the instinct was there, gnawing at me. Something was off, and my heart told me to pay attention. One afternoon, I caught a snippet of a conversation between Laura and a man I didn't recognize. Words like secret, complications, and not ready floated into the kitchen where I stood, frozen by the doorway. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. I tried to dismiss it. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe stress was making me paranoid. After all, I had bigger concerns: my son's health, my own surgery, the looming uncertainty of the operation. But Mikey's whispers continued. One night, as I tucked him into bed, he whispered so softly I could barely hear. "Grandma. Mommy she isn't really married to Daddy. She just moved in after the accident." I froze. Accident? My mind raced. I had assumed Laura was his wife, his partner, his life companion. But Mikey's words hung in the air like smoke, vague, terrifying, impossible. I asked gently, "Mikey, what do you mean?" He avoided my gaze, fiddling with the edge of his blanket. "I'm not supposed to say, but she's not Daddy's wife." "Not really?" "I saw her on the phone with someone, and she said she could still take his kidney if something happened." My stomach churned. Take his kidney? What was happening? The surgery was scheduled in hours. I had been ready to give my body, my life, for my son. But if what Mikey said was true, then who was I really protecting? Who was benefiting from my sacrifice? The hospital was sterile, antiseptic, too bright, too quiet except for the hum of machines. I paced the corridor, my hands shaking as I tried to piece together Mikey's words. I confronted Laura gently at first, in a private corner. "Laura. Mikey said something about you. About you and my son." Her eyes flickered. Fear? Guilt? Anger? I couldn't tell. I don't know what you mean," she said, her voice smooth, almost rehearsed. "Don't lie to me," I snapped, the fear I had buried for months erupting. "He said you're not married to David. That you might have another plan for him." Laura's lips pressed into a thin line. And then the truth spilled out, not with a dramatic confession, but in quiet, trembling sentences that tore my heart into fragments. She wasn't David's wife. She never had been. She had been a neighbor, a caretaker after David's last hospitalization. She had moved in for convenience, not love. She had learned of the surgery, my willingness to donate, and had allowed Mikey to believe she was part of the family to ensure the operation could proceed. I felt the room tilt, the floor disappear. My son, asleep in the nearby pre-op room, smiled at me weakly. He had no idea. My body trembled, not from fear of surgery, but from betrayal. I turned to Mikey, who clutched my hand. "Grandma. I wanted to tell you before it was too late." "Too late for what?" I whispered. "Too late for you to save Daddy yourself. She was going to take advantage of you, Grandma." I stared at Laura, feeling every ounce of trust one had invested crumble. I thought of the months, the preparations, the prayers. All for a lie. I had to act. And I had to act fast. My first thought was to stop the surgery. My heart, fierce with love and fury, knew I couldn't allow deception to guide such a sacred act. I demanded an immediate delay. The nurses were shocked, the surgeons concerned. I took Mikey into a quiet corner. "Tell me everything. Every detail." He did. Every call, every whispered plan, every manipulation. Laura had thought she could get control of the situation, and maybe she would have, if I hadn't intervened. I called David's doctor aside, explaining in fragments, careful to protect my son from panic. They agreed to postpone the procedure until I could understand the situation fully. Then I confronted Laura, calmly but with an edge that made even her falter. "You will leave this hospital. You will not be near my son while he is vulnerable. And you will explain everything to him before he wakes. She tried to speak, to reason, but I wouldn't allow it. I felt a strength rise inside me, the same strength that had carried me through sleepless nights, through childhood scrapes, through loss and grief. I wasn't going to let my love for my son be weaponized against him. By the time David woke, the truth was out. The hospital staff, already sensing tension, knew enough to distance Laura. Family members arrived, whispering, watching. Mikey clung to me, brave in his own small way. David's reaction was complex: shock, confusion, disbelief, but I watched him slowly piece together the truth. Laura tried to explain, but the weight of lies crushed her credibility. She was escorted out. The community murmured. Friends, neighbors, colleagues, they all learned of the deception, though carefully framed to protect my son's dignity. No one vilified, the focus was on truth, and the right thing being done at the right time. I watched my son, still weak but growing stronger, understand that the love we had for him had shielded him from harm. Weeks later, the surgery went ahead, this time, without deception. My kidney now safely transplanted to my son, I watched him recover with quiet relief. The bond between us had deepened, tested by fire, tempered by love. David and I spent long evenings together, talking, laughing, sometimes crying. Mikey slept between us, proud of his role, yet innocent of the storm he had helped avert. The lesson, clear as sunlight through a hospital window, was this: love requires vigilance, courage, and sometimes, hard truths. Family is sacred, but trust is earned. I forgave, but I didn't forget. I rebuilt, slowly but deliberately, with boundaries and awareness. And in the quiet moments, I whispered thanks, for health, for love, for survival, and for the little boy who reminded me that truth, no matter how fragile, is worth protecting. Now, as I sit in my quiet living room, watching my son regain his strength, I think about the delicate threads that hold families together. One secret, one lie, could have unraveled everything. But truth, courage, and love that acts fiercely, saved us. Would you have acted as I did, stopping the surgery at the last second to uncover the truth? Or would fear have silenced you? Life doesn't give us these moments often, but when it does, we must listen to our instincts, trust our hearts, and never underestimate the wisdom of those who see more than we think. If this story touched you, if it reminded you of the power of family, of vigilance, of love, please subscribe and share your thoughts. Let's keep these voices alive, and let the lessons linger in the hearts of all who hear them.